if you haven't started your dog's recall training by the time that they're 6 months old, you're in for a really tough time. The good news is that I'm going to give you some ways that you can make it better even if you have passed that age point. So let's get into it. So if your dog is over 6 months old and you've just heard me say that, you're probably freaking out a little bit, but let me just explain what I mean. So when dogs are puppies, what they are going to do naturally is they're going to want to follow you. They're not going to be as brave and as confident to go off and explore, especially not very far away from you. So what you can do with a young dog, and what you should do with a young dog, is every single time they come close to you, what they'll kind of do is they'll go away from you a little bit. So if you're in the garden or even in the house, or when you start taking them out on walks, they'll bounce away from you a little bit, but they'll usually just rebound and come back to you. And whenever they do that, you want to be rewarding them all the time for it. And then you just attach their name and their recall command onto that natural behavior that they're going to show you anyway. And that's what creates a really solid foundation for recall. So when I say that a dog over 6 months old, this is going to be more difficult, what I mean is that when they get over 6 months old, their range gets a bit further. They're going to be a lot braver, they're going to go further away from you, and they might not actually be bouncing back because their curiosity and all of these things are going to start taking over. And for as long as you kind of let them get far away from you without encouraging them to come back at that early age, they're just going to keep getting further and further and further, and that range is going to get wider and wider and wider. So if you have a dog that is over 6 months old and maybe you've not started your recall training, or maybe it's just not going very well, this is what you need to start doing straight away. So if we're going to start improving your dog's recall, you're going to need some things straight away. The first thing that you're going to need is a long line. Now this long line is ridiculously long. This is the long line that I like to use when I'm coming out into public areas like I'm in today. It's probably, I think this is 20 or 30 meters long. It is a bit ridiculous, but if you have got a large dog, or if you've just got a dog that's a little bit adventurous, go for a longer line, because it's going to give you more to grab onto, and it's going to obviously give your dog more freedom, which is going to improve the repetitions of recall that you can do in the long run. The second thing that you're going to want is a high value reward. Now my go-to high value reward is sausages or hot dogs. So this is what I'm working with right now. I don't know if you're going to focus on that. There you go. Just hot dogs cut up into small pieces. They're super cheap and the dogs absolutely love them. What I can't really get away with when it comes to recall with most dogs is giving them their kibble. Normally when I'm training, I'll use their regular kibble, but in this case, when it comes to recall, most dogs aren't going to take it. So let's just see what Lolly has to think about her everyday regular kibble here. I'm going to try and offer her a little piece, and she's turning her nose up. Come. She's going to come to me, offer her a little piece of kibble, and she's like, hell no, where is the hot dog at? There it is. Good girl. So you're going to want to get that high value reward. So it's something different to what you usually give your dog, because what you need to remember is that when you come out here, you're in high level situations. So you're going to need a high level reward to combat and compete against the dogs, the squirrels, the whatever it is that your dog might see. And then you're going to use your long line, not only to interrupt them and to stop them from going towards those things that you're going to be competing against, but also to encourage them to come back. What you have to remember is that when you're teaching recall, you're doing two things. You're encouraging your dog to come back to you, and you're teaching your dog that coming back to you and being near you is a good thing, which is where they're going to get their rewards. But you're also teaching them that running away from you, ignoring you, and moving towards distractions is a bad thing, and you need a nice way to be able to interrupt that behavior. So that's where the long line needs to be in place. And what you're not doing with a long line is just holding onto it all the time and letting your dog get to the end of it and then they drag you through the long line. You are specifically using the long line to interrupt them when they choose to move away from you, or to just use it to encourage them to come back, at which point they're still going to get their reward. So what you're not doing with your long line is just using it as an extended lead that is just restraining the dog and constantly just preventing them from doing the things that they want to do. You want them to be able to do what they want to do, but you're waiting for those key moments where they decide to leave you, or they decide to head towards that dog or that squirrel or whatever it is. That's when you grab the lead, that's when you stand on it, that's when you interrupt that specific behavior so the dog fails. and then when they come back to you, they win because they get the reward. If you're doing that consistently over time, and it's probably going to take a long time, especially if your dog has rehearsed running over to squirrels or rehearsed running over to dogs, and you let them do that a few times, and it can only be a few times, that actually makes the behavior pretty well ingrained. But what you're doing now is you're trying to counter that. So now you need to teach your dog that that is no longer something they can do. It has to be impossible for them, and they have to fail, and then the only time that they're going to win is when they come back to you. So this last point is something that many people overlook, and it's about not just practicing your recall when you're outside in the field or in the forest. That you've actually got to be practicing that recall all the time, and in the place that you spend most of the time with your dog, which is at home. You really want to be making sure that your dog's recall is really good inside your house and inside your garden, because if it isn't, you're not going to stand a chance when it goes to being outside. So I know there are many dogs out there that maybe don't come to you when you call them in from the garden, or maybe when you call them to be put on their leads to go for a walk, they go and hide under the living room table. These are the things that you want to work on, because these are times where actually you can practice good recall, because all your dog's doing in those moments is saying, no, I don't want to come back to you, I want to do this instead. So you want to make sure that you're practicing, and you're going to be practicing in exactly the same way as you do it outside. You're always going to want to have a long line on your dog when they're inside the house. Something like this is perfect. It's just like a really thin puppy line. It's quite long as well, so if she was to decide to not come back to me and go and hide under the table, I can just grab the end of the lead and say no, and then reinforce her to come back. So that's going to be really important for you to do when you're inside. And then equally, just as when you're outside, you are going to want to be rewarding your dog for those moments when they come back to you inside the house as well. And actually, if you've got a young puppy that is under that 6-month mark, this is what you absolutely have to be doing, is every single time your puppy comes to you, whether you've called them or not, you want to be rewarding them either with food or with lots of praise and lots of fuss, so they start to learn that coming to you, whether it be on their decision or your decision, is the best thing that they can possibly do. So just remember that consistency is the absolute key. You need to consistently be practicing your dog's recall inside the house and outside of the house. You need to just make sure that you're rewarding them heavily for coming back to you, and also making sure that you've got a way to reinforce that recall should they decide not to listen. If you're doing that, you should have good recall in no time, no matter what time you started. So as always, I hope this has really helped you guys out. Please do leave your comments in the comment section below if you have any questions about your dog's training, and then subscribe to the channel so you can see the next video that I post, especially if it's on that question that you've left in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you guys in a bit.